From the outside, Daniel and Aisha Mwangi looked like a couple who had won at life. In Nairobi's middle-upper circles, they were admired quietly. Daniel, a disciplined professional with a reputation for calm logic, and Aisha, elegant, articulate, and effortlessly charming. Together, they projected stability. No public fights, no gossip, no scandals. The kind of marriage people pointed to and said, "That's how it should be." So when Aisha announced their dream vacation to Morocco, no one questioned it. Morocco sounded romantic, exotic, safe. A place for couples to rediscover each other among lanternlit riads, winding Medinas, and endless desert skies. Aisha described it as a second honeymoon. Daniel smiled in photos, arm around her waist, the Atlantic wind brushing his face. But photographs lie. Behind closed doors, the marriage had been quietly unraveling for years. Not in explosive arguments, but in silence. Conversations ended faster. Trust eroded slowly. Daniel had begun sleeping with his phone locked, his thoughts guarded. Aisha noticed everything. Those close to Daniel would later recall subtle changes before the trip. He postponed meetings, updated documents, asked unusual questions about insurance and emergency contacts. One colleague remembered him joking, "If something happens to me abroad, at least you'll know I planned well." At the time, it sounded harmless. It wasn't. The Morocco trip had been Aisha's idea. She chose the dates. She booked the flights. She selected the riads, private, intimate, and far from the noise of large hotels. She insisted they travel light. Just the two of them. No friends. No distractions. To Daniel, it felt like a chance to fix what was breaking. To Aisha, it was something else entirely. On the night before departure, neighbors saw the couple leave their apartment quietly. No arguments. No raised voices. Aisha wore a soft smile. Daniel carried both passports. At Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, CCTV captured them checking in together. Daniel kissed Aisha's forehead. She leaned into him. Anyone watching would have seen love. What no camera could capture was intent. When their plane lifted off the runway, neither of them knew how the journey would end, but only one of them knew it wouldn't end together. Morocco awaited them with open arms, and death was already packed. Long before Morocco entered the picture, the Mwangi marriage had begun to fracture in ways that were easy to hide and easy to ignore. Daniel was methodical, predictable, and deeply private. He believed problems were solved quietly. Aisha, on the other hand, thrived on control and certainty. She needed reassurance, visibility, and direction. In the early years, those differences felt complementary. Later, they became fault lines. Friends noticed the shift first. Daniel stopped attending social gatherings without explanation. He declined weekend trips. When asked about Aisha, his answers grew shorter. "She's fine. Busy. Work stuff." The warmth that once followed his words was gone. Aisha told a different story to her circle. She spoke of a husband who was emotionally absent, a man who kept secrets, who questioned her spending, who made her feel replaceable. She framed herself as the one holding the marriage together, the one fighting to save something Daniel had already abandoned. Both narratives couldn't be true in full, but both carried fragments of the truth. Arguments, when they happened, were quiet and surgical. No shouting, no broken objects, just carefully chosen words designed to wound without leaving marks. Daniel would withdraw. Aisha would press harder. Silence became their most frequent companion. And then there was money. Investigators later discovered that Daniel had recently reorganized several financial accounts. Beneficiaries were reviewed. Access was limited. It was practical, he told colleagues, just planning for the future. But to Aisha, it felt like exclusion, like preparation for a life without her. That fear planted something dark. In the weeks leading up to the Morocco trip, Aisha's behavior changed subtly. She became attentive again, almost too attentive. She cooked Daniel's favorite meals, suggested late-night walks, talked about starting fresh. Daniel noticed the shift and mistook it for hope. But behind the scenes, her phone told a different story. Search histories later retrieved by investigators painted a chilling picture. How long do sedatives stay in the body? Deaths mistaken for heart attacks. Legal process when spouse dies abroad. None of it proved intent on its own. Together, it formed a pattern. Daniel, unaware of these searches, confided in a close friend just days before the trip. He admitted the marriage felt strained but said he believed Morocco could help. Sometimes, he said, you have to leave home to remember why you built it. Aisha overheard none of that conversation. What she did hear was Daniel making a phone call that same evening. His voice low, cautious. When she asked who it was, he brushed it off. Work. It wasn't work. That moment, investigators would later conclude, may have been the point of no return. By the time their bags were packed, the Morocco trip meant two very different things to the two people boarding that flight. For Daniel, it was a last attempt at repair. For Aisha, it was the final act of control. And the cracks behind closed doors were about to break wide open, thousands of kilometers away, where no one knew them and no one would hear the silence. Marrakesh greeted them with heat, color, and noise. The kind of chaos that feels romantic to travelers and overwhelming to locals. The call to prayer echoed through the city as scooters weaved through narrow streets and vendors shouted prices in rapid Arabic and French. Daniel seemed lighter here. Removed from Nairobi, from routines and pressure, he smiled more. He took photos. He joked with shopkeepers. For brief moments, the tension between them softened. Aisha watched him closely. By their fourth night, they checked into a traditional riad tucked deep inside the Medina. A place chosen deliberately for its privacy. No long hallways, no crowded lobbies, just an enclosed courtyard, a handful of rooms, and staff who respected discretion. That evening, the couple dined alone. Hotel records show that Aisha requested room service instead of eating in the courtyard restaurant. She explained that Daniel felt tired and wanted a quiet night. Staff delivered a carefully plated Moroccan meal, tagine, bread, and mint tea, just after 9:45 p.m. CCTV footage later reviewed by police showed Aisha accepting the tray herself. Inside the room, the world narrowed to two people and a locked door. Daniel mentioned feeling exhausted. He complained of dizziness, blaming the heat. Aisha suggested he lie down and drink water. She handed him a glass. Something clear, something ordinary. He trusted her without hesitation. By 10:30 p.m., Daniel was visibly drowsy. Hotel Wi-Fi logs later revealed that Aisha's phone was active well past midnight, while Daniel's showed no activity at all. At 1:12 a.m., she searched a single phrase. How long before unconsciousness? The room stayed silent after that. No neighbors heard a struggle. No raised voices. No crash of furniture. Just the quiet hum of the city outside and the slow passing of time inside a riad room that would soon become a crime scene. At approximately 5:40 a.m., Aisha later claimed she woke to find Daniel unresponsive. But medical examiners would question that timeline. Rigor mortis suggested Daniel had been dead for hours before the call to reception was made. At 6:12 a.m., Aisha finally dialed the front desk. Her voice, recorded automatically, trembled. My husband. Something's wrong. He won't wake up. Staff arrived within minutes. Daniel lay on the bed, still, his skin already cooling. No visible injuries. No sign of distress frozen on his face. Only the peaceful stillness of someone who never saw the end coming. Emergency services pronounced him dead shortly after. Aisha collapsed into tears. But even in those first chaotic moments, seasoned responders felt something was off. People who die suddenly usually leave chaos behind. Daniel Mwangi's death had left quiet. And quiet, investigators know, is often the loudest warning of all. Death in a foreign country often begins with assumptions. When Moroccan emergency responders arrived at the riad that morning, they followed the most common narrative for sudden tourist deaths. Exhaustion, dehydration, an undiagnosed medical condition. Daniel Mwangi was in his late 30s, well-dressed, and showed no signs of trauma. His wife stood nearby, wrapped in a robe, shaking and tearful. At first glance, it looked like tragedy, nothing more. but trained eyes notice details others miss. The first irregularity was Daniel's body temperature. It was lower than expected for the time Aisha claimed she had found him unresponsive. The second was his posture. He was lying neatly on the bed, as if placed there deliberately, not collapsed by sudden pain. There was no vomit, no signs of panic, no evidence of a man waking up in distress. That troubled the medical examiner. An initial check of Daniel's records revealed no history of heart disease, no chronic conditions, no medication that could explain sudden death. He had passed his last medical examination just months earlier. Aisha, when questioned, insisted Daniel had complained of chest tightness and fatigue the previous evening. She described herself as having fallen asleep beside him, only to wake and find him lifeless. But her story began to fracture under simple scrutiny. She couldn't explain why she waited before calling for help. She struggled to recall exact times. When asked what Daniel had eaten and drunk, her answers changed. First tea, then water, then medication she later admitted she might have imagined. Moroccan authorities ordered a full autopsy. The results changed everything. Toxicology screens detected traces of a powerful sedative in Daniel's bloodstream, one capable of suppressing respiration in high enough doses. It was not a drug commonly prescribed, nor one typically carried by travelers. More importantly, it had been administered orally. Someone had given it to him. The room was sealed. Daniel's belongings were catalogued. Aisha's luggage was searched discreetly. In a cosmetics pouch, investigators found an unlabeled container with residue matching the sedative. When confronted, Aisha claimed it was medicine for anxiety. There was no prescription. Hotel staff were interviewed next. One detail stood out. Aisha had insisted on handling all meals and drinks the previous night. Staff remembered her clearly because she refused assistance and declined additional service after dinner. It was a small detail, but in homicide investigations, small details are everything. What was first treated as a medical emergency was now classified as a suspicious death. And Aisha was no longer a grieving wife. She was the only person who had been alone with Daniel when his life ended. The dream vacation had officially turned into a crime scene, and Morocco's justice system had just stepped into a case that would soon cross international borders. By the second day after Daniel Mwangi's death, the case no longer belonged solely to Morocco. Once toxicology results confirmed the presence of a sedative, Moroccan authorities formally notified the Kenyan High Commission. A sudden death abroad was one thing. A suspected homicide involving a foreign national was another entirely. Within hours, Daniel's family in Nairobi received a call that shattered any remaining illusions. This was not a natural death. As Moroccan police continued their work on the ground, Kenyan investigators began reconstructing Daniel's life from thousands of kilometers away. Bank records, phone logs, emails, insurance documents, everything was pulled. What emerged was a pattern that felt less like coincidence and more like preparation. Just 3 weeks before the trip, Daniel's life insurance policy had been updated. The beneficiary remained Aisha, but the coverage had been quietly expanded to include double compensation for deaths occurring outside Kenya. When questioned later, Aisha claimed she didn't remember the change. Digital forensics soon added weight to the suspicion. Recovered data from Aisha's phone showed deleted messages and browser searches stretching back months. Investigators found inquiries about sedatives not easily detected in standard screenings, how foreign death investigations differ by country, time windows before certain substances metabolize. None of the searches mentioned Daniel by name. They didn't need to. Meanwhile, Moroccan police examined surveillance footage from airports, pharmacies, and shops visited by the couple. In one clip from days before the fatal night, Aisha was seen entering a small pharmacy alone. She emerged minutes later, holding a white paper bag. The pharmacist later confirmed selling a controlled sedative to a woman matching her description, after she claimed it was for severe travel anxiety. That explanation might have worked if the drug hadn't ended up in Daniel's bloodstream. As pressure mounted, Aisha's demeanor changed. The crying came less frequently. Her answers became clipped. She asked repeatedly when she would be allowed to return to Kenya. Investigators noticed something else. She never once asked to see Daniel's body again. When informed that Kenyan detectives would be flying in to cooperate, Aisha requested a lawyer. That request marked a turning point. At the airport, as arrangements were being made to repatriate Daniel's remains, Moroccan authorities stopped Aisha just steps from departure control. Her passport was taken. She was escorted to a private room. There would be no flight home. The investigation had crossed borders, and there was now enough evidence to suggest that the Morocco trip had never been a vacation at all. It had been a plan, and plans leave trails. Aisha Mwangi had rehearsed grief. She knew when to cry, when to lower her voice, when to press her hands to her face and let silence speak for her. But sitting inside the small interview room at Marrakesh Menara Airport, with her passport confiscated and 2 officers standing by the door, the performance finally began to crack. She was no longer a wife in mourning. She was a suspect who could not leave. Moroccan investigators began with simple questions: names, dates, timelines. Where were you seated during dinner? What did Daniel drink? When did you fall asleep? When did you wake up? Aisha answered confidently at first. Then the contradictions surfaced. In her initial statement, she claimed Daniel had complained of chest pain shortly before bed. In a later version, it was dizziness, then nausea. When asked why she hadn't called for help immediately, she said she thought he was sleeping. When shown medical evidence that suggested he had been dead for hours, she said she must have been disoriented. Disorientation doesn't explain everything. Investigators placed a printed timeline in front of her: Wi-Fi logs, CCTV stills, pharmacy footage, and the toxicology report. They didn't accuse her. They let the facts speak. That was when Aisha asked for water. Her hands shook as she drank. When questioned about the sedative found in Daniel's body, she denied knowing how it got there. When shown evidence of her pharmacy purchase, she went quiet. When confronted with the insurance policy changes, she stared at the table and said nothing at all. Silence in interrogation rooms is rarely accidental. After 6 hours of questioning, Moroccan authorities made their decision. Aisha Mwangi was formally placed under arrest on suspicion of premeditated homicide. The charge stunned her. As officers read her rights, witnesses later described her reaction not as panic, but disbelief, as if she had never truly considered that her plan could fail, that the country she chose for anonymity would become the place she lost her freedom. She was transferred to a women's detention facility outside the city. Her personal belongings were logged. Her phone, once her planning tool, was sealed as evidence. News of the arrest reached Kenya within hours. Daniel's family, still reeling from shock, now faced a harsher reality. The man they loved had not died of chance or fate. He had been killed, and the person accused was the one he trusted most. For Aisha, the dream vacation was over. The riads, the markets, the sunsets, gone. What remained were concrete walls, fluorescent lights, and a question that would follow her for the rest of her life. Was it worth it? Investigators didn't struggle to find how Daniel Mwangi died. They struggled to understand why. The answer lay in control. Financial records showed growing tension, restricted accounts, revised beneficiaries, and a future Aisha could no longer fully access. Messages recovered from her phone revealed fear of abandonment, resentment, and an obsession with not losing everything. To prosecutors, this wasn't rage. It was calculation. Morocco wasn't chosen for romance. It was chosen for distance, for confusion, for the hope that death would look natural. Daniel trusted his wife to protect him. Aisha, investigators believe, saw the trip as her last chance to decide how the marriage would end, and she chose permanence. Aisha Mwangi now waits in a Moroccan detention facility as the legal process unfolds. Because the crime occurred on Moroccan soil, the trial will be held there, under a justice system unfamiliar to her, in a language she does not speak fluently. Kenyan officials remain involved, but they cannot bring her home. Court filings outline a simple case: opportunity, preparation, and intent. A wife, a locked room, a substance given in trust. Daniel Mwangi's family attends hearings remotely, watching a man's final moments reduced to evidence and timelines. For them, justice is no longer abstract. It is the only remaining connection to a son, a brother, a life cut short. Morocco was meant to be a dream. Instead, it became the place where love ended and accountability began.